available later. And then just one final note, we are anticipating, again, like we just said, to give out approximately $8 million to fund 15 to 20 projects that'll last 3 years. We think that we are going to get a wide range of funding requests and different scales of projects. So we're just noting that like framing, particularly because we don't have a specific limit on the amount of funding that you can request for this program. Our commitment is that we will fund 15 to 20 projects, but we recognize that they will be at a wide variety of different scales. Okay, moving on to the beginning. This is screenshots directly from the request for applications document. The document starts out with just some purpose and then background about this program. The program was funded, like we said, by a CPRG grant that was did from the EPA. That grant was focused on reducing methane emissions. Food waste is responsible for 58% of landfill methane emissions. So it's a really significant portion of methane emissions. And so that is why we are targeting food waste, particularly through this grant. All of the projects that we fund will be implemented over 3 years. And the goal is that the projects will create a new set of examples of how to prevent, rescue, and compost food in lots of different ways. We had to start somewhere when we got this funding. And so our goal is that we can have lots of examples of how to do this kind of program well. And in addition to the focus on methane reduction, our goal is really that all of these programs will be engaged with their broader community and their local food system, and that the surrounding community will really benefit by the work that you all are doing at your institution. So methane is our primary focus. But our goal is that this will trickle into lots of other areas and have a broader impact on your local food system. Some additional background about the grant. Because this money came from the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, which is federal funding, some of the requirements or all of the requirements that we specifically have under our federal agreement transfer on to these subawards. That is something that we will talk a little bit about more later in the presentation, but just wanted to emphasize that this is federal money and that all of the requirements that we have with EPA are passed on to our subawardees. Subawardees won't be directly responsible for communicating with the EPA, but that is eventually where a lot of the information from this grant program will go. And so subawardees should just be aware of that. And this program came to be out of previous work from our office that worked with colleges, universities, and state agencies on some previous executive orders and some other previous executive orders that had us focus on food waste. So this program really was built out of that previous work. And colleges, universities, and state agencies were selected to be the recipients for this program because they'd previously expressed interest in preventing food waste, composting, etc. And we really saw these institutions as places where we would have a captive audience for this type of work in primarily the student body, but also a place where we could test out lots of different food waste solutions pertaining to food procurement, production, waste management, etc. So that's why they were chosen as our target audience for this Subaward program. We've said this a couple times, but just want to reemphasize colleges, universities, and executive branch state agencies are the groups that are eligible to apply for this program. We do encourage partnerships with other organizations. So if you are not directly one of those organizations, you could still be involved in this program. You just need to partner with someone who's directly eligible. Directly eligible applicants are also able to pass on funding to other organizations through this program. They just need to be, the primary applicant needs to be a college, university, or executive branch state agency. And then just another note on funding, because this is federal money, all of our applicants need to have a unique entity identifier number to apply, and that needs to be associated with your SAM.gov registration. If you have kind of questions about that or are confused about that, you can let us know and we can help you with that. But our assumption is that as colleges, universities, and state agencies, most of you would already have that number. And if you don't know right now, it would probably be a good question to ask your grants office. All right. Next, we'll have a whole section about budget requests. So I will get to lots of those questions in a moment. But just a note on expenses and activities that we will fund. Successful applicants so if we decide that we are going to award your project, you are going to need to sign a subaward agreement with DEQ. In that document, DEQ has certain terms and conditions that will be passed on to our subrecipients. And because this is EPA money, any terms and conditions that were included in our agreement with EPA will also be passed on to the subrecipients of our grant. So that is just something to be of note. Our grant agreement will be included in like the zipped folder of application materials that you are able to download. So you can see that, all the information included in there. And if you have specific questions or concerns about a particular part of that, we are here to help, and our Office of Financial Management is here to help with those questions. But just wanted to note that. And then some other just notes on expenses and activities that are eligible. There's no cost sharing requirement under this program. So there's no cash match or anything like that associated. That being said, if a university or a college or a state agency wants to contribute some of their own funding to these programs, you are more than welcome to do that. It's just not a requirement of our program. And then as we get further on in this presentation, we'll discuss the budget, but just some other notes on expenses. Personnel is an eligible expense, and lots of other things are also eligible expenses. I will say anything that has a reoccurring expense associated with it, what we're going to want to see in your application is that you have a continuity plan for how that expense will be carried on after the 3-year period is over. We only will be distributing funding for 3 years. And so if there is a continuing expense, there needs to be a plan for how that will continue to be funded after this program is over. And then some other notes, there are certain pathways in terms of managing food waste that are not eligible under our program. We will reference the EPA's wasted food scale later in this presentation, and it'll be included in your application. But feeding animals and anaerobic digestion are not included under this program. So the only interventions that we will fund are food waste prevention, food rescue, and composting activities. There are examples included in the request for applications document about what kinds of things we will fund. That is by no means an exhaustive list, but we thought it would be helpful to give you some idea. And if you want even more examples of the kinds of programs that we are interested in, our team created lots of resources, including this document that has case studies and examples from colleges, universities, and state agencies in Virginia. That is available on our website in addition to lots of other resources that I will go over later. All right, reporting requirements for selected projects. Because this is a EPA grant, we have certain reporting requirements to the EPA. And the thing that they are primarily going to want to see from us is that we are funding projects that will avoid methane emissions. Subrecipients are not, so that would be you all. You are not directly going to be communicating with EPA. We will be compiling our own information and reports to send to them. But we just want you all to know that eventually that is where your information will go. Anyone who has a successful award under the program will be responsible for collecting environmental information and metrics related to pounds of food in terms of diversion or pounds of food prevented from ending up in the landfill. Those will come from lots of different sources depending on the kinds of programs that you all implement. But we just want everyone to know that calculating metrics on this kind of thing and collecting data will be a part of the agreements that you all have with us. Once applicants are selected and we know that we are funding a given project, DEQ is going to work with anyone who has a successful application to create reporting standards that fit whatever your particular intervention is. So depending on what that intervention is, that will look like a lot of things. The primary piece of information that we will ask you all for is pounds of food that were either prevented, rescued, or composted. But there are certain scenarios where other environmental metrics would be interesting to us. So think about like miles traveled, or like gallons of water used to like process food waste or something like that. Those are other things that we might be interested in, but we will work with all of the funded applicants to determine what exactly we need information on. Generally, DEQ favors diversion strategies that are less resource intensive. So if you think about food rescue, that might mean keeping food as local as possible or using minimal repackaging materials. For composting, that might mean collection strategies that avoid additional energy or water outputs. So we know that there are a lot of existing technologies and ways to implement this kind of program. On our website, we have an EPA report that goes over all of the different commercial pre-processing technologies. So if you're interested in one of those, we encourage you to look at EPA's report on that. And then my last caveat in this reporting section will be that all of our successful applicants will have quarterly reporting standards to our office. The quarterly reporting standard doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be submitting a super long report to us 4 times a year, but you will be required to check in with DEQ 4 times a year. And then there will probably be a more expensive semi-annual or annual report. But our goal is that we'll be in regular communication with any project that we fund. All of the programs need to address a combination of food waste prevention, food rescue, and composting. We need all of the programs to address more than one of those interventions. That does not necessarily mean that there needs to be equal levels of funding or programmatic support for different interventions. We want all of these programs to be reasonable within their contexts. And ultimately, the goal is to maximize the amount of food that we keep out of landfills. So anyone applying should make an effort to have more than one category addressed. You need at least 2 intervention categories to be funded under this program, but that should be within reason and it should make sense on your specific campus or at your institution. The other thing that I will note about that is that we know that interventions happen at a wide variety of different levels. And we know that different institutions applying for this program already have certain programs in place. And so we don't have any requirement in terms of like what is enough of a given intervention. And so if your intervention is that you have 1 public compost bin available, if that's more than you were doing previously, that is great to us. So we don't necessarily need you to, like, if your dining hall is not willing to partner, there are other ways to implement these programs, and it's okay to work within the tools that you have. Later in the presentation, we're going to go over some tools that will help you identify some different interventions and gain a better understanding of what might be the most effective. There are lots of resources online, and we'll go over just a few of them, but we encourage you all to take advantage of resources as they are available. There is a section included in the RFA document that is just general guidance on the application. This section pertains to specific questions and sections in the actual application. We know that there are some questions where you might want more information, and so more information is provided in this guide, but we will go over that a little bit later, but that's just something to be aware of. Budget guidance is also included in the RFA document. So our budget categories follow EPA's model of creating a budget, and we have some resources linked in here in terms of EPA's budget guidance. That is what you should follow for this program. Because it's EPA money, you should follow their guidance, and that is our expectation. The table included in this document will give you more information about the type of or like the level of detail that we're expecting for different budget categories. So the budget spreadsheet, which will be included in your folder and I'll show later, is where you are going to give an itemized budget list. And then in the actual application document, there is a budget narrative section. And in the budget narrative section, that is where you are going to explain, why a given category of funding request is adequate, reasonable, cost-effective, and necessary. So that gives you an opportunity to explain a given request. There are certain requirements in terms of federal funding that might apply to this program. Generally, we don't think that that will be a huge problem in terms of the types of interventions that you all are selecting. But if you have a concern about something like that, we are happy to work with you, and our Office of Financial Management can work with you to determine if something meets certain federal requirements. In the application, we are going to ask you 2 questions. The questions are going to ask you about essentially your current situation at your institution, and then your proposed activities. So the first section is going to ask you to develop some baseline metrics about what is already happening at your institution. So if you have certain programs that are already underway, we want to know what those programs are and how much they are preventing, rescuing, or composting. Or in turn, if you do not have any food waste prevention strategies underway at your institution currently, we want an estimate of how much food you think is going to the landfill. This section correlates with the following section, which will ask you about the diversion potential of your proposed programs. And so when you're thinking about what baseline metrics might be reasonable to report to us, you should think about what your proposed activities are. And so if your proposed activities, one of those is an intervention of food diversion from campus events, one of your baseline metrics should probably be something about like how many events you typically have on campus or how much food is typically left over, something like that. We've included some tools in this section as well that has like volume to weight conversion factors and a waste diversion calculator. In terms of developing these baseline metrics and then this next section, which I'll forward along to, all we ask when you're giving us your estimates is that you tell us how you got to that information. And so we encourage you to use reasonable assumptions and use representative samples to collect data, things like that. We just want you to explain to us how you got that number so that we know the process you followed in creating those estimates. You should use the best available information that you have, and we recognize that this will probably be a process for many institutions to collect this information, and that there are certain things that might just be unfeasible to report on. So use your best information that you have and wherever necessary, make assumptions that you need to in order to give us a good prediction of how much food is currently being sent to the landfill and then the amount of food that you think you will be able to divert from your proposed programs. So estimates under this category, diversion potential, this is only accounting for anything that is new under your proposal. So any diversion that would have happened prior to whatever you're proposing in this application would not be included. This would be diversion potentials that were possible because of the new activities that are included here. In terms of estimating how much a given intervention might be able to divert, we have included this free-fed insight engine tool a couple times. This is the tool that DEQ used in our grant application to EPA to calculate diversion potential of a given program. So we encourage you all to also use that calculator or other reasonable resources that you find. But I'll go over that tool at the end of this presentation. And then the last thing that I will say on calculating diversion potential, DEQ will require that you all report to us in pounds of food. So we want essentially the raw data, but ultimately what we're reporting back to EPA is methane emissions. And so our team will put the data that you give to us into EPA calculators. We will calculate the methane diversion potential that happened because of the activities that you reported on. If you are interested in better understanding the emission impact, we will link the EPA calculators that we will use to convert that data for EPA. So you are welcome to use those tools and explore them. Ultimately, you still will report to us in pounds of food, but we understand that you might be interested in getting a better understanding of the emission impact of a given activity. When you are evaluating a potential intervention for this proposal, methane diversion is our, or methane emission prevention is our #1 criteria that we are focused on. But we are also going to be evaluating all of these proposals based on their long-term potential for success. So we want to fund programs that are reasonable and proposals that clearly have shown that they have thought about like whether or not the proposal is feasible. So think about that. Think about like the amount of labor required to continue to coordinate the program, how many resources you'll use, maintenance of any technology that you're using, things like that. All of the programs should be designed to maximize environmental and community benefits. And so we want these to last beyond just the 3-year period where we'll be able to provide funding. This is obviously a complicated issue, and so there are lots of resources that our team has pulled together, and I will go over where those are online. So we encourage you to take advantage of those resources. And during the application period, so starting once the application is online, if you have questions for us, we will answer general questions about the application. We won't answer a very specific programmatic question about a given application. But if you have general questions about the application, our process, anything like that, we have a Google form, or not a Google form, a Microsoft form, where you will be able to submit those questions. And then we will answer those questions. We'll respond to you via email directly, but we'll also post our responses online so that all applicants can see all the questions that have been asked, and we'll have the same information available to them. So we'll have a Q&A page online that is accessible to everyone. These are all of the things that we will be expecting in a completed application packet. So the whole package of application will include a variety of things. Some of these will be included as attachments. We're almost at the point where I will show you the actual application. The application should be 15 pages long, but that does not include these other letters of support or roles and responsibilities of the project team that will be included as attachments. And then your budget request spreadsheet will be submitted separately as an Excel form. And you should use the template that we provided to you. Other things that we are asking for is an indirect cost rate agreement if you have a current federally approved indirect cost rate agreement, and then also a Virginia W-9 form, which will be in your application pack, like the application folder that you will download for us. Those two help us in terms of processing grants and processing subawards once we get to that point. The application is due on November 17th. By the end of the day. At a note though, we will not be around at 11 p.m. to answer emails if you try to submit at that time. So we encourage you to submit within business hours. If you have particular problems with like submitting your application, once you get there, you can reach out directly to me and I can troubleshoot that as needed. And then if we have any initial questions after our initial review, we may contact you with requests for more information, things like that. If we are missing something or we just want more information about the budget or the scope of your project. If we do have more questions, we will reach out to the primary contact. So whoever is listed as the primary contact on your application should be aware that when we start reviewing applications in November to December, you will be our point person. DEQ is going to evaluate these applications based on a rubric that I will show you all now. This is our rubric for the program. We will have a team of DEQ reviewers who will score all of the applications based on these different categories. So like how reasonable your budget is, the methane reduction potential of your program, and then other things like programmatic capability, so how feasible is whatever you are proposing, program continuity, your alignment with the wasted food scale, and then also community engagement and partnerships. This will be available to you in the RFA document, so you will have this. That is how we will be scoring applications. Now I'm going to get into the actual application. These are, again, screenshots. The application sections are directly aligned with rubric categories, except for this first section, which is just an overview and asks for basic information and contact information. The one thing I will note about this section, the main thing we're asking you to do is to summarize your project and the goals of your project. One of the questions will also ask you to give us tasks and milestone dates. So essentially, you'll create a timeline of how you think you will implement this project. If you are successfully awarded, that is the timeline that we would use to track your progress on the subaward. We can obviously make adjustments afterwards, but that will be generally what we will use to make sure that the applications that we have successfully awarded are making good progress. And then I will also note throughout the actual application, this document is the application and you will fill in your responses in these boxes. This is the piece of the application that is limited to 15 pages and also included within these boxes. You can be concise in these areas. So you can include bullet points, whatever makes sense. And then also included at the end of this overview section is a room for narrative. So if you want to have more flowery language or like space for like paragraph long explanations, that's where you would do that. This section is for the budget. This is a screenshot of the Excel spreadsheet where you will fill out your budget information. You are encouraged to add more rows to this as needed. The budget, like your itemized budget, is going to go in this spreadsheet. You'll see right here that there are columns for years 1, 2, and 3. And then PRC, which there's a note in here that you can't see, that stands for prevention, rescue, and compost. In these boxes, all we are asking you to do is leave a little X mark to indicate which year of your proposal that given budget line item refers to, and then which intervention that refers to. So we know that there are probably some budget requests that are going to be relevant to multiple years or multiple intervention categories. This is just to help you and help us keep track of it. And that will be relevant for one of the questions that we ask in the actual application.
All right, I'm going to pause you real quick. Yeah. We have a couple of questions, a lot of them budget related. The first one, is there a published FA indirect cap published by EPA for this?
It doesn't appear that there's a cap from EPA. We will like double, triple confirm that just to make sure. But yeah, from what we've seen, there's not a statutory cap that EPA has put on it.
And we'll make sure that that's in the FAQ that we post after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Would temporary staffing be eligible for funding, like paying for a 1, 2, or 3 year fellowship to support implementation and outreach?
Yeah, that would be eligible.
Yeah, and again, as Sydney mentioned earlier, the only thing is if that is a 1 or 2 or 3 year position, you know, what happens after that to keep it moving? Next is, can the budget support infrastructure like a building, composting, central location?
Yep.
In addition to the question above, would the budget support equipment costs? So skid loader for moving composting materials on site, things like that.
Yep.
All right, and this is not a budget question, so I'm going to save this question that just came in until the end so we can just kind of keep going through.
Okay, we're almost through the application packet, and then I'm going to show you all some resources, then we can get to other questions. The budget narrative section is in here. This is where you'll explain why a given request is necessary, cost effective, adequate, and reasonable. The next section is the methane reduction potential section. This section is largely going to be related to the baseline metrics and then diversion potential metrics that I mentioned earlier. The one part of this section that I want to include is just highlight is question 5. Question 5 is directly correlated with those columns in the budget request spreadsheet that I just showed you. What this is asking you to do is explain how much money each intervention will spend, and then how much food that intervention is expected to divert, so that we can have a cost per pounds of food for different intervention categories, and then also for the whole project. Programmatic capability will ask you primarily to support this information through like additional documents that you will include in your application. So we want to know the roles and responsibilities of the project team. So essentially bios of anyone who is working on this project, want contact information for people who are engaged in this. So if there are multiple different units at an institution working on this, we want like a contact for each unit that is involved. And then letters of support, we are requiring a letter of support from the top official at your institution or their designee. And then other letters of support are optional. So other people who are engaged in this project, you can submit additional letters to show that they have been involved in the planning process and they can more thoroughly explain their role. Program continuity is just how this project will continue beyond the 3-year subaward period. The The wasted food scale section asks you to just explain how you are using the wasted food scale to inform your approach. This is also the section if you are in your proposal, if you already have a very thorough program in place at your institutions, you already have a very thorough compost program in place, and you don't think that that program needs additional funding for expansion. And so in your budget and funding request, you only want to focus on food waste prevention strategies. You can do that. You just need to explain to us why you are not requesting funding for more than one intervention type. So this is where you could do that. And then this section also asks you about circularity within the food system. So this is where we would want to know something like, where is finished compost being used? Is that compost being kept in the community? Something like that. Community engagement and partnerships is where you explain how this program connects beyond your office and goes into the broader community. So that can be internal to your institution, and it should also be external to your institution. We want to know that these projects are local food systems. And this is our last section of that. These are all the different resources that are available to applicants. Most of these are on our website. So in a second, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then reshare my screen so that you can see where all of these things are available to you. We have lots of documents that we created, and then also just other links that we have compiled that are helpful. The one thing I'll note here is on this outreach material section, our team is working on developing general education and outreach materials, and we are in the midst of that process. So if any of you would be interested or willing to let us come either table at your institution or conduct virtual focus groups with students so that we can get a sense of what people think about the materials that we have created, please let me know. I will include that later, but we would love to get some feedback before we actually decide on a given intervention. This is a screenshot of our website where you will be able to find lots of these tools. Lots of the resources that we created are underneath those little bubbles. There are these documents that cover lots of different strategies. There's lots of good information in these, so please take advantage of them. We know that people are coming at this from lots of different angles, so this is a good way to think about lots of different interventions that could make sense. Challenges, trends, best practices, and then also the calls that preceded this call are recorded and available online. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second, and then I'm going to reshare a different screen so that I can show you all one of the most exciting resources that we created. We included this in our most recent email blast. Some people may have already seen this, but this is our Virginia Excess Food Opportunities map. This is a map that our team created so that you all would have a resource and know what kinds of things are around you. So in this map, there's lots of different information about anything related to excess food. If you go up here to the top of the map, you can see all of the different layers. Not all of the layers are necessarily turned on right when you open the map. So administrative layers it has basic information about geography and where things are. That might be helpful. So you can check layers on and off here by just clicking these little buttons, and then things will appear or not appear if you don't want them to. Colleges and universities are the little purple dots on this map. The community engagement layer group. We have a layer of community partners that we created through organizations that we have already been engaged with. If there's a community partner that is doing things in the food waste prevention space that is not on this layer, they just need to reach out to us and we can get them added to this layer. Other things in this layer, community gardens, farmers market, public libraries, public schools, school gardens, all things that might be relevant to this project in terms of external groups that you might want to partner with. The compost layer is not, oh, sorry, there it goes. The compost layer has information about compost hauler areas, which are the shapes on here that you see. The food waste composting processing facilities, and then municipal compost programs. So any localities that have composting programs are also included on this map. And then the last layer group is about food insecurity resources, food rescue, food donation resources. So food bank service areas, that kind of thing. One of the cool tools that I would like to highlight on here is this toggle at the top. Lets you select a location and then a radius. So I can take my little pin. I'll drop it on Richmond because that is where we are. And then this map will create essentially a list for you of all of the organizations that are around you that are relevant to this work. So you can see who would pick up your compost, if there's a municipal compost program around you, any community partners that are near you, that kind of thing is all included in a list for you here. So this is a good way to get a sense of the types of organizations that you could potentially partner with. And then the last resource that I will share with you all while I have my screen shared is this Refed Insight Engine tool. The main thing that we are going to talk about is the Explore Solutions tag, but they also have this cool Calculate Impact tool that some of you might want to explore to get a better sense of the mission impact of whatever you are planning. This tool has lots of different solutions related to food waste as they're organized in the categories up here. For our purposes, because our grant is focused on methane reduction, we would want you to toggle to this methane reduction tool and then also toggle to Virginia because that is where we are all located. And then this tool will essentially give you a list of the most effective interventions. It'll sort them up here in terms of what are the most impactful interventions for methane reduction. And then it'll give you a list here. And then you are able to click into any of these and learn more about the calculations behind these things and just like more information about how you can implement something like this. So there's lots of resources on here. We definitely encourage you all to take advantage of this tool. This is a tool that our team used when we were creating our application to EPA. That is what was used to create our emission targets. So I'm going to jump ahead. Oopsie. I would like to resume. It's so smart. Okay, so I just showed you all this map, which is available online, linked on our website, the Stopping Food Waste page. A note that DEQ is relaunching our website. So the Stopping Food Waste page, the link will change at some point in the next few weeks, but we will make sure that you're all aware of when that happens. And it has a redirect link. So you shouldn't lose any of the materials, but just be aware it might look different. All right, with all of those many questions, we are now going to launch another poll about what kind of training resources might be helpful. So we have the ability within our budget to provide you all with some more resources. So if you have any like specific questions or areas where you would like some training to help implement a program like this, let us know by either typing in the chat or selecting one or more of these categories above. Other than that, feel free to ask other questions right now. We have a couple minutes and just reminders that all of this will become available to you on Monday, September 15th.
All right, so another question that came in, will applications be just accepted or rejected in full, or will the review team be able to carve out parts of proposals that are highest priority and award funding to only those parts?
Yes, so if we were going to do something like that, we would come back to the applicant and have more information, but we could partially fund a particular intervention. So we wouldn't reject something in full if there was a piece of it that we wanted to support.
Can this also support composting expansion for items that are not food scraps? To do with, for instance, paper towel composting, which is shown at universities that have done characterization studies to be up to 10 to 11% of campus trash or compostable materials with food in them. So with that one, it can be done as long as it's part of the expansion for food scraps. At the end of the day, again, we're reporting on methane emissions. And so we, the focus is on food waste. So if it's, just part of a broader expansion that includes food scraps and falls under that, that would be fine, I would think. Next question, can you submit multiple smaller interventions in one application, or do you prefer one large intervention?
No, I would say we definitely encourage multiple smaller interventions. We recognize that there might be a flagship intervention that is the primary target of your application, but we would like all of the applications to include more than one intervention. Our goal is that you're thinking about food waste prevention, food rescue, and compost, so thinking multiple layers and thinking upstream in terms of food waste prevention.
We're
We just
expecting,
want one per institution, right?
Yes.
yeah, one application per institution, and we are expecting a variety of different types of interventions. Like some that might be really big
Mhm.
and some that are a bunch of smaller things.
One application per institution, though. Good note.
All right, we don't have any more questions right now, so please put your questions in the chat if there's anything that we haven't covered or that you're not sure about. But we can talk about the responses. It seems like a lot of people are interested in compost processing and regulations. And that's about, 28%. Okay, we have another question. If there's a potential community partner not listed on the excess food opportunities map, is that problematic? Can we still work with them as potential collaborators? How do we add other external partners?
Yes, absolutely. That map is imperfect. We can update that resource. So I'm sure that there are people engaged in food waste prevention that are not included on that resource. So that is by no means an exhaustive list. And if there is an organization that's not included on there, if you just email me, I can get them added to the map.
Yeah, it's not meant to be all inclusive. It was just the people that had already reached out to us. We wanted to make sure that we were trying to help connect those people to eligible sub-awardees. So if you're not on there and you'd like to be, just let us know.
Yeah.
Does this board get it to them or should they just?
All right, it seems that for the last poll, it's pretty equal after composting, compost processing and regulations, pretty equal between compost collection strategies, guidance on food donation law and liability concerns, behavior change, community-based social marketing. Those are all equal. And then a couple people are interested in learning more about food handling and safety. But definitely reach out to us at any time if you have, ideas for additional resources that we can provide.
Any other questions? People are, I'll stop sharing my screen. I think everyone's looked at that one now. People are also welcome to unmute. Did I stop sharing my screen? Yeah, it's still sharing. Okay, well. Okay, there you go. Feel free to unmute as well if you have questions. But thank you all so much for coming and listening to this presentation today. We are so excited that so many people are interested in this program.
And we hope you get, a lot of use out of the map. That's one of the most exciting things for us as well. And we can't wait to see all the ideas that you have.
Looking forward to seeing everyone's applications for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Have a good afternoon. I hope that see any other questions coming in. A lot of thank yous, which, we appreciate, but you guys all provided a lot of information throughout this process. We've talked to so many people in the space, so many stakeholders as this has come together over the past year or so. So thank you guys for working with us and helping us make this valuable.
Here's a question about incineration.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're unsure of whether waste incinerator will continue, should you put the methane calculations between incinerator and landfill?
I would say use your best judgment. I think in terms of the wasted food scale, it's definitely preferred to prevent, rescue, or compost over incineration. So I think use your best judgment of whatever is happening currently at your institution.
And I think we're really asking for pounds of food.
Yeah.
So we'll probably get about where your waste goes when we get to that point.
Yes.
Anything else? You know how to reach us if you have any questions that you can put in the chat.
Thank you all so much.
Megan, can you all hear me? Hello?